Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the EmeraldPlanet. All the ecology news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's your host, Executive Director of the EmeraldPlanet, Dr. Sam Lee Hancock.
Hello and welcome to the EmeraldPlanet as we come to you from Washington, D.C. in the United States as we look around the globe in 144 different nations, looking for those 1,000 best practices, technologies, services, and products that are making a difference as we move through the 21st century. And as we have societies that are becoming more and more complex, and the Internet of Things, and the world is connected through the Internet, the Ethernet, and all the other ways of communicating in today's very high-paced modern world, how do we actually protect all this infrastructure that's been created so that actually it's being used by the people that are supposed to be using it for the purposes intended, and being protected from the ones that should not be there? And actually I have someone that's sitting right beside me that this is her day-to-day job. This is Cara D. Sidener. She is the Special Agent, InfraGard Coordinator for the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I'm going to put that out there. FBI, Washington, D.C. Field Office, and Northern Virginia Resident Agency. That's a very long title that you have there, and but we really welcome you to the EmeraldPlanet and to talk about what you're doing.
Thank you very much.
And this whole notion of InfraGard is really of great interest. I have a good friend, Joe Coulter, has told us much about that over the years. And so we're going to talk about that in great depth. But let's just introduce a little bit the FBI. It doesn't really need an introduction, but we're not doing gangsters and all those things, but close to it in the cyber world. So tell us about the FBI and these offices that you have.
Well, the FBI is a national security organization. We have both law enforcement and intelligence responsibilities, and we have over 30,000 personnel, agents, analysts, and other professional support across the globe that support our mission of protecting the American people and upholding the Constitution. We have 56 field offices domestically and over 300 resident agencies, one of which I am assigned to here in Washington. And probably a little over 60 legal attaché offices, which is our presence overseas outside of the U.S.
Yeah, and the whole thing about that sounds like a huge number of people, but when you think about you have a nation of 318 million people, that's really not very many people at all.
It's not.
So how does it go through that? This was something I just thought of. How does it go through all this with that small a number of people? We're not lobbying Congress for anything, but you know, how do you protect that many people, and it's constantly changing and growing at the same time?
Well, we have to be intelligence driven and threat focused, and that really drives, you know, our priorities to combat terrorism, cybercrime, counterintelligence and espionage, among other things. Those are our top three, though.
Now, looking at this notion of InfraGard, it's a name, it's a noun, so it really is something. And you're the coordinator for this, and you're also a field agent. So correct. I'm not sure where one starts, the other stops, and all that, but tell us a little bit about what is InfraGard, and then what does a coordinator do to take care of this thing that's actually doing all the multitudes of things that you just told us you have to be responsible for.
InfraGard is a public-private partnership between individual members who belong to an InfraGard chapter and the FBI, and their mission is to promote information sharing between those individuals and the government, primarily the FBI, to protect critical infrastructure. It started over 20 years ago, primarily as an effort to have the FBI get smarter about cyber, as that was really evolving for us. So in a small office in Ohio, we had some folks go out to subject matter experts in information technology to help us get a better grasp as to how that was evolving. And a couple years later, headquarters got wind of it and said, this sounds like a good program to really promote those partnerships between the public and private sector and the FBI. And as we have grown from just a cyber-based organization, we really now look at all threats and all hazards. We follow the 16 critical infrastructure sectors that are designated by PPD 21. So we really kind of reflect the same I guess, model that the Office of Infrastructure Protection has at DHS to ensure that we're looking at the threats that face the sectors.
Yeah, and we have these chapters in this national map. Of course, we see a lot of concentration on the East Coast, which you can understand is what 60% of the population in the United States is here. But looking at this broad area, when you look at a Texas with only 3, and you've got some of these larger states, is it by population? Is it by territory? How do you determine the chapter and where it's located and then what its functions are going to be?
So each one of the chapters is geographically affiliated with the FBI field office that it is territorially close to. So there's 56 field offices and there's actually 84 InfraGard chapters. Each of them are their own 501c3 nonprofit group. They have an elected board of directors, and in each one of the FBI field office there is a special agent like me who is assigned to be the liaison between that InfraGard chapter and the field office and to promote their mission and activities and also be the conduit through which information to and from the FBI can flow.
And looking at this again from the public-private partnership idea or collaboration, you really have a critical function in all that because you need to know who these people are.
Correct.
And then how that filters back into what you're doing. We're going to ask a few questions about that in a few minutes, but it's just amazing how you're spread all over the United States. And then also go back again to how many overseas affiliates that you have. I think that's of real interest. We kind of hit that, but let's hit that again right now.
We have over 60 legal attaché offices. Usually they're co-located in a U.S. embassy, and there we're able to work with the local law enforcement and intelligence services in those countries to promote collaboration and partnership to protect not only the American people, but help them in their mission as well to protect their own citizens.
Now looking at InfraGard, and you've really hit a little bit of that, but why is it so important to the United States to have this vast network of people, which is different than the field agents that you have as far as the FBI is concerned? And then what comfort does this give to the citizens of our country that somebody is really looking out for us?
Right. Well, I mean, critical infrastructure is estimated to be 80 to 90% owned by the private sector. So clearly we can't protect that which we don't own without being in partnership with them. So it's essential for us to know what the needs and concerns are of those stakeholder operators and owners so that we can better inform them of the threats that they face, and they can also help us to fill in gaps when we have questions because we're not going to be the expert on everything there. And the FBI provides the vetting for the membership. So individuals volunteer to join, and the FBI conducts a security risk assessment of those individuals because they do get access to information that's not widely available to the general public. It's still unclassified, and sometimes it's for official use only, but it allows them to have a greater connection to some of the information and intelligence that's shared to protect critical infrastructure.
Yeah, you're looking at the power lines here, and we realized some years ago, supposedly a tree fell in Ohio, going back to your Ohio experience, and knocked out virtually all the northeast of the United States. And so if you look at it from a critical infrastructure point of view, there are little key points that somebody could actually do dastardly harm to the whole society if it really wanted to, and wouldn't take that much to do it.
Right.
So looking at these things here, where we are, all these other kinds of things, how do we really know where they are? The they is the people that really want to do harm to the United States and to its citizens.
Well, I think we have to rely on people to, the adage of DHS, see something, say something. If it doesn't look right, if it doesn't feel right, to report that information. And that goes for information that might affect critical infrastructure, whether it is a potential terrorist act or a criminal threat, cyber intrusion or attack, that we rely on people to tell us that information. And I think through InfraGard, because we provide a trusted forum for people to speak not only to one another but to us, it gives them a greater level of trust and confidence that they're sharing information with who they need to share it with.
Yeah, and then when you look at the infrastructure of the United States, I mean, it's so vast. One, it's a very large country, very diverse. But at the same time, it's just, I mean, the investment is into the tens of trillions of dollars. That's real money.
Yeah.
And you look at, some of these scenes, I mean, this is just one, small part of this whole infrastructure we're talking about. So how do we connect this vast resource that we have, because we're saying it in a singular, but it's really resources by really millions of units. So how do we tie all that together? Is there any way we can actually do this in cyber? Or are we really just kidding ourselves that we can monitor all this in real time?
It's a huge effort, obviously, and it takes the efforts of not just the federal government, but state and local entities and nonprofit groups like InfraGard. One of the efforts of InfraGard, I think that kind of raises an awareness level above that just of being aware, but actually trying to do something, is our electromagnetic pulse special interest group. So that's a national special interest group, which the name is a little bit of a misnomer. The gentleman who founded the SIG, as we call it, is Chuck Manto. And rather than just call it an electromagnetic pulse group, he says it's the every major problem group, because it does really look to long-term outages and how that affects the interdependencies that critical infrastructure has. So we might be prepared for 3 days or maybe a week or a couple weeks, but our whole of nation isn't really looking at what's going to happen if we don't have power for 6 months or a year or longer
like Rita
than that.
Katrina. I mean, you know, it was 6 months minimum before they could actually get the processing as far as all the hydrochemicals down in the Houston and, you know, all that whole area down along the Gulf. That's when you realize how interdependent we really are. And we're totally dependent on these areas.
Absolutely. And the EMP SIG seeks to give resources to communities so they can become more resilient. When the government resources, as you said, take a long time to come in and kind of sort everything out, that communities, individuals, smaller organizations have tools and resources to be more resilient against those threats that might provide.
And you talk about 90% of the infrastructure is owned in the private sector anyway.
Correct.
And so there's tremendous resources in there. And what's the FBI's role as far as the partnerships, these collaborations that you've set up?
Well, really, with InfraGard in particular, it's providing that vetted membership, because that really gives the individuals the knowledge and comfort that everyone else with whom they're discussing these issues have also been vetted. So it provides that basic level of trust among the members, so that when you're sitting in an InfraGard meeting or an InfraGard forum, you know that the information that you're sharing is with someone who too has been vetted.
We're running out of time. Carol, where do you see this whole thing as InfraGard going over the next 5, 10, 15 years?
I think it needs to continue to grow. I mean, we still need individuals to commit to helping protect critical infrastructure.
That's absolutely fantastic. This is Cara D. Sidener. She's a special agent, InfraGard coordinator, Federal Bureau of Investigation, Washington, D.C. Field Office, Northern Virginia Resident Agency. I love that title, Resident Agency. But thank you for being with us, dear viewers, as we look around the globe as we create the Emerald Planet.
Made your house a reality. Homeschooling yourself on loans, color-coding listings, and flushing every toilet in a 20-mile radius. If you can ace house hunting, you can do it for retirement. Get on track with tips at aceyourretirement.org.
Here's to the things that can keep us safe. Those we use all the time with hardly a thought. Those that are silently standing by to save our lives. And now, those that we carry with us everywhere we go. Many mobile devices will now bring you wireless emergency alerts, real-time information directly from local sources you know and trust. With the unique sound and vibration, you'll be in the know.
Listen, I realize that I'm not perfect, but it all really started to change because you judge me for having a problem. No one is going to know that I need help. I need help. I know that no one is going to judge me for having a problem. I realize that I'm not perfect, but it all really started to change because you listen.
Family.
Whether it's a short trip or a long haul.
Estimated time, 47 hours.
They will beg.
You're hungry? I'm happy to provide.
They will plead.
Deep fried butter on a stick.
But whatever you do, Don't wimp out.
Now you're talking.
Make them buckle up.
He can't hurt.
Remember, safety first. Cheese curls second.
Are you orange?
We're back to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Hello, welcome to the Emerald Planet as we look around the globe for those 1,000 best practices, technologies, services, products, and the people, of course, are making a difference as we move through the 21st century. And as we have a planet that will have 9 billion people by 2050, how are we going to be able to provide the food, the fuel, the fiber, all the basic infrastructure, but more importantly, how we're going to be able to protect what we have and what we're going to need when we add 2 billion new people to the planet. And I have someone sitting right beside me that not only plans and thinks about all these things, but actually is doing something about it. This is Cara D. Sidener. She is a special agent, InfraGard coordinator for the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, Washington, D.C. field office, and Northern Virginia resident agency. And Cara, welcome to the Emerald Planet.
Thank you for having me.
We've been talking about having you on for a long time, and glad to finally have you here. But looking at InfraGard and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, what was the wake-up call? You said this goes back about 20 plus years, and of course we know about 9/11, but I don't remember anything specifically 20 years ago that we needed to do, but there must have been some kind of wake-up call for InfraGard. What was that? What was that
I think during that time, this was in the mid-90s, cyber was really changing for us. It was becoming less about a computer being the tool used to commit the crime and more the actual target of the crime. So maybe what was housed on a network and the information that was there. And so as that was really evolving for us, we recognized that we needed some help from the private sector, and we went out to subject matter experts who worked in the IT field, not only in private industry but across academia too, and asked them to help us get smarter about this evolving threat that we were facing since the techniques and tactics were changing.
Now looking at cyber, you know, we throw this term around and everybody says cyber this, cyber that. Really, what is cyber for the least initiative among our viewers here and abroad?
I mean, using the internet, whether it's to communicate or, unfortunately, to commit criminal activity. So, you know, using your laptop, your smartphone, your desktop computer, any number of devices that allow you to use the internet as a means to get to other places and do other things.
Now, looking at all this, do most people think they're very secure, they're very private in what they're doing, and you hear that through the news media. There's a crime, we can't get into the phone. Everybody thinks, phew, they can't get into the phone. It's not really good for that, you know, particular crime at the time, but people feel reassured. But actually, people are not as protected as they think. So looking at cyber and what people are doing with their devices, and they're constantly moving more and more around with those devices, what should people be doing? And then we'll get really into the InfraGard, but how do they protect themselves, which is their own little private InfraGard?
Well, there's a lot of different things that you can do. I mean, we live on the internet now. We do our banking. We do different kinds of financial transactions. Of course, we post all kinds of things about our lives and pictures and on different social media sites. So people need to be aware of the information that they're putting out there is there permanently. And that once it's on the internet, there isn't really a removal process. I mean, it's out there. So having, you know, security settings for privacy, using antivirus software, ensuring that you have strong passwords, not clicking the link on unfamiliar emails that may seem like they're legitimate, but if you just stopped for a moment and thought, would my bank really send me a link to change my password, that maybe they would take a step further, maybe call the bank rather than just click the link. Unfortunately, there's a lot of cyber hygiene. I think that we still need to impart to people, whether they be digital natives, which I call my children, or my father's age where it needs to use a computer and wants to learn it, but there's still some pitfalls for older Americans too. So there's a lot of basic steps they can take to prevent some of those cyber incidents.
Yeah, looking at this whole thing as far as InfraGard, I know this is something that the FBI, helped in founding and all that, but in a sense, you're partnering with InfraGard because now it's out there. You have, private citizens that are joining this. They're vetted, but they're still joining the organization. So it really has become a priority as far as the FBI is concerned. And they've assigned you a special agent to work with that in the field of this whole thing. So when did it rise to this level of priority as far as the FBI is concerned and using InfraGard to really protect the citizens but the infrastructure of the United States?
Well, I think that's one of the hallmarks of the FBI is that we recognize that the information and intelligence we get come from people telling us things. So it's vital for us to develop those kind of partnerships with organizations and entities and individuals who have information that will help us initiate new investigations, predicate investigations, maybe enhance ones we already have going on. But also to mitigate against threats, especially those that threaten our critical infrastructure. So going out and having this vetted membership of individuals who are owners and operators of infrastructure who want to be proactive in protecting those assets makes it a very natural relationship to have. And I think the Bureau, because we've been doing this with InfraGard for over 20 years, we've recognized for some time the importance of having those partnerships.
And it's really matured. When you have 20 years of anything, 2 decades, that's a long time in today's world as far as working with it, getting more and more people involved. And one of the main things, I think, this is just like when you're traveling overseas, is that first thing I do is I check in with the embassy. And people say, oh, that's silly, you don't need to do that. No, I really want to do that because whether it's a friendly nation or not, I want people to know that I'm there. And if you need to send the cavalry, I want to be able to somebody know that I'm going to call the cavalry if I really need it. So I think that's important. But looking at the top 3 activities, what you would consider that of InfraGard, what would they be and why are those chosen by you and others? And then are the other critical areas that we really ought to talk about here on EmeraldPlanet TV?
Well, every chapter is different based on the demographics that make up their chapter. So someone in Houston might be more focused on activities that are looking at oil and natural gas, whereas someone perhaps in Northern California might be focused on the IT sector. So it really depends on who is in a chapter and how they want to drive their efforts. Our chapter here in Washington, D.C. Focuses a lot on the defense industrial base, information technology, and government and commercial facilities, because that's predominantly what's here in this area. There's a lot of awareness that we promote through our programs and activities, which is probably one of the primary things that we drive. We also try to drive members to go to our portal, which is where our intelligence products are posted, and they are afforded access to that, which again would provide them with information to help them harden themselves against targets and be less vulnerable. And then also I think having that national perspective of there's other chapters with which they can partner to do regional functions and activities and also share best practices, lessons learned, things that might apply to, let's say, a port area in a town may not have the same issues that someone who doesn't have a maritime activity. So being able to reach out to another chapter that perhaps has some of those same assets and figure out, what they are doing to protect those assets.
Yeah, it's kind of like a state like Virginia, which is really, it's almost like a little country in its own, but you have, the Norfolk ports.
Yep.
And the Chesapeake and all that, 5 major ports, plus you have the largest naval base in the whole world. So you have a dynamic there, but then you have the inland port. It's almost in Winchester, Virginia, almost in the mountains. So it's amazing the diversity that you have. You call it a port, but I mean, they're totally different.
Absolutely.
And how you have to protect it and the asset that you actually have there is very, very different. So it's interesting how you're going across all this and trying to protect. But it's a two-way street.
Absolutely.
You have all these members, so you're pushing information out, you're trying to get information back in. So what is some of the key information that the members actually can provide to the FBI that makes your job easier, makes them feel more secure? And at the same time, is how do you share that information back and forth? Is it something that's open source? Is it private? Is it both? How does that really work?
Both is probably, and all, I guess, are probably the answer. So a lot of times InfraGard members, because they have a familiarity with their FBI field office, they know a person because there's a special agent that is in touch with their chapter. So cyber incidents, for example, are probably one of the most common things that get reported. We encourage and still have to go out and encourage private industry to report cyber incidents to us because it helps with our threat picture. We understand if the bad guys are changing, their activities or their techniques, and without that information, we don't necessarily know and can't get ahead of that threat.
And the concentration that may be. And all of a sudden you're thinking, why is this happening right now? What's going on in the industry? It could be oil and natural gas. It could be in gold, whatever it is.
And seeing trends like that also allows us to maybe do some predictive analysis to say, well, it's hitting this sector, is it going to go to another sector next? So cyber incident information is something that's pretty commonly reported. Also just suspicious activity. If you are a security guard at a water treatment facility and something doesn't quite look right, and maybe it rises above the level of just going to your supervisor or your facility security officer, but letting the FBI know. And even if it's not information that fits squarely within what the FBI's purview is, we have partnerships with other agencies and organizations to be able to then get the information to the right person. So there's a lot of facilitation between those that have information and us getting it to the right customer, if you will.
Yeah, and I was thinking about this on the way over here as far as 9/11. When you see all the disparate bits of information, it made absolutely no sense. It was nothing connected. But when you looked at it in toto, you could see exactly what was going on and how you do it. So how do you bridge that? And we're running out of time, but quickly, how do you bridge that? So you got all these disparate pieces out there, but how do you weave that together so you have a narrative? Or is it just sometimes you're just going to miss it?
Well, I think we have improved a lot in kind of integrating intelligence into our organization and in all of our operations. And InfraGard is a key part of that because we have a national program office at FBI headquarters, and there's also an InfraGard National Members Alliance. They kind of sit atop the structure to ensure that chapters are talking to one another and that information not only is going top down but bottom up as well.
That's fantastic. Well, we've absolutely run out of time, but this whole thing about where are you going in all this? You're the field agent, you're the coordinator as far as InfraGard. What do you see for your future? And we have about 20 seconds to do that.
I think that I try to use the experience that I have with the Bureau, having been in a variety of roles over 20 years, and connect the right people with each other. And sometimes those relationships are really what is most important.
Yeah. And that's something that's going to carry on, because that really does have a legacy. If you put it in, it's put in right, and you pass it on to the next generation. I mean, it's just phenomenal what you can actually do with that. This is Kira Sidener, Special Agent, InfraGard Coordinator, FBI, Washington, D.C., Field Office, Northern Virginia Resident Agency, as we create the EmeraldPlanet.
You know what, guys? There's a lot of tree branches and dry brush over here. We should probably move the bonfire over there.
I'm guessing Smokey liked that idea.
Hey, Hard, what's this?
That's my resignation. You're resigning. Why?
You've been putting me under a lot of pressure lately. That's why I'm ready to quit.
Oh, I forgot. I'll do better. Please don't quit on me.
Don't let your heart quit on you. Get your uncontrolled high blood pressure to a healthy range before it's too late.
So you can't save money? That's easy as pie. Brown bag your lunch instead of going out. $6 save times 5 days a week times 10 years is $21,000. That's a lot of lettuce. Small changes today, big bucks tomorrow. Feedthepig.org.
Did you know kids who play outdoors have healthier lungs?
Totally. I did. Did you know that boys that play with dolls make better husbands?
My son has lots of dolls. But did you know terry cloth diapers breathe better?
I did.
It's totally true.
Oh, yeah.
Did you know that strollers have the right of way on the sidewalk?
Yes.
Yep, I did. Did you guys
Did you know that kids who eat breakfast have higher GPAs?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. That's actually what I was going to say.
Did you know babies should never touch silver? It's really bad for them.
I knew that.
Did you guys know that statistically friendly kids have more friends?
Yeah. That's obvious.
Did you know most people think they're using the right car seat for their kid, but they're not?
Parents who really know it all know for sure that their child is in the right seat at the right age and size. Visit safercar.gov/the-right-seat to make sure your child is protected.
I'm putting that on my blog.
I just put it in mine.
We're back to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
On a week-to-week basis as we look around the globe for what we call the best of the best practices and things that are truly working and have proven themselves over a period of time and actually making a difference in the communities where they're being implemented. And as we say, what's being done here may be done across 10,000 other communities around the globe. And we're looking at this whole notion of infrastructure, the importance of it, how to protect it, and where is that taking us as we move through the 21st century towards 2050, when we'll have a planet with about 9 billion people on it, all competing for resources. But we want to protect the resources that we have and all the new inventions and creations that are coming along from now till 2050. And I have a gentleman that's actually doing something about this. This is David Winks. He's the managing director of InfraGard, and he's also the finance lead for the National InfraGard Electronic Magnetic Pulse EMP SIG Special Interest Group chapter in Washington, D.C. And David, welcome to the Emerald Planet.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
We're really glad to have you. And tell us a little bit about your company, InfraGard, and your work as managing director. And then we'll get into the InfraGard part of all this.
Sure. InfraGard is focused on protecting critical infrastructure, and we help protect things like our power grid and our water systems from various kinds of challenges or threats, electromagnetic pulse being one of those. And so we see this as a way to help ensure that their manner of life continues as we hope and expect it would.
And the whole thing about what you're doing, David, I mean, you really are, and I said this and you laughed at me, but I really believe this. You really are a national good, because what you're providing is that you're protecting the infrastructure that this country and the citizens themselves and private business invested trillions of dollars in. And if you just leave it out there, I mean, there are a lot of bad people on the planet that would like to just come in and play with it and then destroy it. So looking at what you do as far as your mission and vision, then how do you take that very simple concept but translate this across literally trillions of dollars worth of infrastructure? That's a huge task.
It is, and so we start by looking at all the different things that could affect that infrastructure, and then we have to think about, well, which ones are the most likely, and how do we protect from each one of those types of threats. And certainly cyber is right up there in terms of the vulnerabilities that we face on a daily basis, particularly for the financial sector. You know, kind of why people rob banks, that's where the money is.
Mm-hmm,
you know?
right.
And so we want to help protect them from cyber attacks and various types of other threats as well.
Yeah, you look at this map, and if you can look at this right over my shoulder with me, I mean, this is a pretty sight, and most people look at this and say, wow, this is incredible, this is the United States, it's all connected and all that, and it does look very lovely. It's like a, giant Christmas tree. But I can just imagine people in your industry looking at this saying, oh my God, what do we got to do to protect all of this? Because when you see one of these little shining lights, I mean, there's thousands of parts, moving and stationary in that one site. So when you're looking at this, what is it that you really see and how do you dissect it? So again, going to the most valuable to maybe the least vulnerable. How do you do that? This is a complex photograph.
Well, when you think about all of the things that we do every day, most of those are reliant on certain critical infrastructures like power, for example. And if we had a prolonged power outage, that would fundamentally change how we do a lot of things in our society. And so when we look at that image, what we don't see is that power grid is made up of about 3,000 different power companies around the country. They're all independently owned and operated, and Yet they work together to make all that happen.
I mean, I think it give you 25 headaches if you had to look at that and think about how we're going to protect all that. But we have a call from Richard of Las Vegas, and we want to work this in, David, if you don't mind. Richard wants to know, what are the core activities and programs of OcuSight? Well, and tell us about that name. That's a very intriguing name you have.
Well, you think about Acquire and Insight, and you kind of mash them together and you get OcuSight.
Okay, got it.
And so what we try to do is help various institutions, whether they're in the financial industry or whether they're in the power industry, kind of rethink their basic assumptions. You know, a lot of times people design for a power outage that might be just a couple of days, and the reality is changing, and it could be power outages that span several months. Puerto Rico being a good example.
Exactly. Yeah, and I tell you, that's just, my heart goes out to all those poor people down there. And it really goes back to, David, when you looked at that site before, all this interconnection, how more and more people are really looking at distributed energy, distributed water, sanitation, all these other kinds of things. So they have more control. It's in the local community.
Right.
Something goes down, you fix it, but somebody can't be, 3,000 miles away, hopefully, and destroy what you have. But what are the three main problems that you're actually trying to solve for your clients, one? And then secondly, how does that ramification then go over to the public at large so that you're solving problems for people that don't even know they have one? They're just going out through their day-to-day world, and all of a sudden the power goes out. We do have a problem.
Well, there are really kind of three things that are kind of needed for commerce in the United States, and we talked about power, and what do you do in a 6-month power outage? What alternatives do you have? How do you use renewables? How do you use maybe natural gas to augment the grid? Things like fuel cells. And then the second is communications. How do you quickly restore communications so that you can actually transact business? That your credit card transactions can clear, merchants can talk to the banks. And then, so as you look at that, the power plus communications, the other thing is, how about the water supply? That's one of the things we noticed in Puerto Rico. They were busy airdropping water everybody. And so that's kind of another thing we take for granted for most of our businesses, that it will have the water necessary to do basic things like just run the restrooms.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing about it too is we don't really think about it, and I'm very involved in Rotary International, and we put, hundreds, thousands of wells all across the African continent as an example. But in about 6 months, about 75% of those are already failing because you're not training people locally to maintain it. It may be too complex for the society. You don't have the spare parts and all those kinds of things. And that really takes us back. How do you protect your clients? And this is really the enhancement of this last question, so that we're protecting the infrastructure, but at the same time we're making, and you and I talked about this earlier, a smaller cyber footprint so that you have less area and less noticeability to the bad guys to come in and try to capture that and take advantage of something that was never intended for. But basic infrastructure, smaller cyber footprint, how do you do both of those, or is that a separate effort?
Well, fortunately, we've put together teams of small innovative companies to solve these kind of hard problems and come up with solutions. And some of those include hardening from the inside out, if you will. Being able to
say that again, hardening from the inside out.
Yes.
Tell us what that means.
So instead of building walls and more walls and walls inside of walls, we took the approach of, if we could change how the CPUs talk to the memory and deny things like the uniformity and that malware needs to go from device to device, make them functionally equivalent but random in their assignments, we could eliminate whole sections of malware for memory corruption errors or return-oriented programming errors. And we're not playing whack-a-mole with the bad guys as they come up with new things all the time.
So in other words, you're just stopping them before they can even get through.
Yeah.
Now, this really is intriguing what you're talking about, and I want to digress for just a minute. So the concept in the past is that, you know, if you have a wall, you build it higher, you build it thicker and all that, and then of course they have more powerful guns. They lob the shells in, or they throw in mortars, or whatever it's going to be. So doing this inside out, I mean, that changes the dynamic, but also it changes the thought process. So how do you teach people that just building it higher, thicker, and all that may not be the way to go, but do something that's more petite, it's more delicate? You know, it's like the ballerina versus, you know, the National Guard tromping through somebody, and it may be a better way to protect.
Well, fortunately, we've been able to work with some folks that are very bright cyber researchers that have come up with pretty new and innovative techniques to be able to fend off the bad guys and remove the things that malware needs. Access to certain memory locations and the uniformity from device to device. So now the bad guys basically have to do recon on every single device out there.
That's incredible. Wow, what a great idea. Now, going to this this whole thing about, you know, the United States manufacturing abroad, and as you know, more and more is being brought back. There's acts coming through, or has already gone through the United States Congress, that they want things that are locally sourced and made here in the United States, because they found out that you know, various devices made abroad were coming in with secret packets, that information was being diverted, had it before we even had it, you know, those kinds of things. So what have you done as an industry and these collaborations of small businesses to really emphasize we need to be homegrown, we need to make it here, design it here, and keep it here? How do you do that?
Well, I think you're seeing a lot of legislation coming through the Congress that's requiring that for anything that touches government systems, for example, and that eventually will flow out into critical infrastructure and perhaps the rest of our society. But the idea is to just simply remove the back doors or the off switches that the bad guys might want to take advantage of. And so coming up with designs that don't have those problems kind of is a good first step, and usually you'll see that in small innovative companies.
That's fantastic. So looking at bad actors, I think we have enough time for this. It sounds like that actually you're discovering ways to try to keep them out before they're ever able to get in, and then you're trying to figure out how to get them out of there. Is that really where this is all going?
Well, the idea behind some of our work is that you know, if you can keep the malware from being able to actually do something once it gets to your device, that's better than just trying to keep them out of the door. So that's been a lot of the focus in some of the...
So smarter, not harder.
Yes, very much so.
Okay, that's fantastic. Well, we're running out of time. Looking at, where do you see your organization being, say, in the next 5, 10, or 15 years, as far as where we're going in all this? We've got about 15 seconds.
Well, we hope to just help provide solutions so that we can harden that infrastructure and make it tougher for the bad guys to mess up our way of life.
That's very succinct. Thank you for doing that. David Winks, Managing Director, OcuSite, Financial Lead for the National InfraGard Electronic Magnetic Pulse SIG chapter of the Great EmeraldPlanet.
Strawberries? Okay.
Okay, so what would you bring to my company?
What do you need?
I need problem-solving skills.
I got through high school without a car, a phone, or a computer.
No college degree, though.
Not yet, but life's taught me a lot, and I'm ready for more.
Well, you're not the typical kind of candidate that I hire. But you are exactly what I'm looking for.
Your company could be missing out on the candidates it needs most. Learn how to find a great pool of untapped talent at gradsoflife.org.
They'll test you. Try to break your will. But however loud the loudness gets, however many cheese puffs may fly, you're the driver, the one in control. Stand firm. Just wait. And move only when you hear the click that says they're buckled in for the drive. Never give up till they buckle up.
We're back to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Hello and welcome to the Emerald Planet as we come to you on a week-to-week basis from Washington, D.C. in the United States as we look around the globe in 144 different nations, looking for those 1,000 best practices, technology, services, and products that are making a difference as we move through the 21st century. I'm Dr. Sam Hancock, the President and Executive Director of EmeraldPlanet and EmeraldPlanet TV. And we're looking at the solutions. Many people talk about all the problems. There's thousands, tens of thousands of other media, but what are the solutions? And that's what we're really focused on. And I have a gentleman sitting right behind me that's also very much focused on solutions. This is David Winks. He's the Managing Director of what's called AccuSoft site, and he's the financial lead for the National InfraGard EMP SIG chapter, and I'll let him talk about what that means in a minute. But David, thank you for being here because you really are a solutions man.
Well, thanks. I really appreciate you inviting me.
And what I've learned about your organization as far as InfraGard, which I've known about for quite some time, but also the members like yourself in private business are working with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, and other government agencies. I think it's a wonderful public-private partnership that's been established here, and it's very important for our country. So looking at what you're doing as far as InfraGard, what does the organization mean to you as a private citizen, but secondly, a businessman who's involved in all this? And why is your company a member?
We realize that, unless we have a strong infrastructure, a strong country, it's very hard to be successful in business. And so part of that is we need to give back to support the society that allowed us the freedom to have a business. And so in joining InfraGard, what I found was a group of like-minded individuals that really are interested in protecting our country and our infrastructure and are looking to create solutions and suggest solutions. And it's a nice blend between the public sector and the private sector.
Yeah, that really leads to the second question I have here. As a small business, which you are, you're in a collaboration with a number of other small businesses. How do you think your membership in InfraGard has really helped your company?
Well, in any small business, you can't do it all yourself. And it's great to be able to access some of the top experts in the country through this association and then that also puts us in a position where we can respond to opportunities that we couldn't have otherwise. So it's been a great opportunity for us.
Yeah, because you look at these massive organizations. I mean, you're directly collaborating with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, and how would you get access to that if you didn't have this kind of organization? But then you think about the DoD, Department of Defense, and you think about the 5 branches of the military, and you think about all the manufacturing and supply side of that whole infrastructure there. This military-industrial complex. I mean, in a sense, you're in the middle of it.
It does.
How do you sensitize yourself and employees of your organization that we really are in the middle of all this vast network, and then we have to seize the opportunity as best we can?
Well, for us, it's about the mission, and not everybody can be out on the front lines, but we can be supporting. And part of that is helping to harden the infrastructure that supports the military and supports our government and of course supports our way of living.
Yeah. Now looking at this, I mean, you're not only been a member, you attend, you go to the meetings, I know that because you just had some big meetings that you were a part of, but you've become the finance lead of, this particular chapter here in Washington, D.C. That is the next step, and that takes a lot of time. You don't help manage or protect the finances of an organization as complex as InfraGard and not take extra time. So what do you see the benefit of that, of going the next step and contributing from that level of expertise? It's different than being a member, paying your dues, and going to meetings.
Well, particularly with the Special Interest Group for Electromagnetic Pulse, that covers a couple of things. It covers things like solar storms, which could happen at any time. It covers nuclear EMP events, like if the North Koreans do something unfortunate. Or it also covers things like directed energy weapons, which we're seeing in various parts of the world. And so all those things could affect our ability to function, to transact business, even our daily lives. And so it's important for us to be able to help preserve that system. And that's why we participate and why we encourage many businesses to get involved and to join us.
Yeah, you're saying we, but it really boils down to you're the one committed to help take the lead as far as the finances and that takes a real commitment, and it takes away from your own business. And so I want to say thank you, and I'm not even part of that, but say congratulations at the same time, because I've been a member of many organizations like Rotary International you're asking about, and others. It takes a lot of time, but that's what America is all about. It's all this volunteerism and people committing to help in the collective, and it goes back to benefit the individual.
And not not only here, but there are folks all around the world that have the same set of challenges. And so I know your audience is global, but every country has the same challenges in terms of cyber, or with the range of missiles, where I think we're all kind of in range now. So some of the solutions that we're coming forward with here in the U.S. I think could be beneficial everywhere.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely fantastic. So what's some of the type of people you're coming in contact with? I named a few of those, DOD and the 5 branches of the military, but there's a huge network out there. What are some of the others that maybe not as obvious as we would think?
Well, in the most recent meeting that we had, we had not only the technical folks, but executives from power companies and water utilities and airlines and communication companies, and so it allowed us to interact with senior folks in all of these organizations. And as a small company, that's a great opportunity.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you had to do that, I mean, there'd be several lifetimes that you would have to invest in doing that, to go out and individually, and here they are willingly coming to you. And that's something that people don't really think about, is why you're volunteering, you're giving your time, but at the same time, you're probably getting hundreds of hours worth of contacts and benefit that otherwise you just couldn't realize it, no matter how big your budget is.
Yeah, it's been invaluable for us.
Yeah. Now looking at that, and that really goes to the next question I had for you, as far as what are you accomplishing both as representing your company and as an officer in InfraGard? How do you see that meshing together, and how is it seamless, or does one kind of hand off to there? How do you do that? And the reason I'm saying this, there's people watching this saying, hey, we need to be a part of InfraGard. And I agree with you, but how do they see themselves as an important link in this whole network?
Well, for example, in the work that we're doing in the financial sector, if there was a 6-month power outage and people couldn't get to their money, they'd get a little testy. Mm-hmm. So we think that the work that we're doing would help the financial sector and the banks and the merchants that are doing business with the banks be able to continue even in the event of natural disaster or man-caused disaster.
Mm-hmm. Now, looking at the who domestically, internationally, and you opened this door, so I'm just going to follow it, right along with you there. And then, why should they actually become involved in InfraGard, how do they do that? And then is there any restrictions on who can join? Is it open? I know it's a vetting type of process, so how does that all work? Just explain it, because this is going all over the globe, so you never know who may show interest.
Well, InfraGard is right now limited to the U.S., and you go through a vetting process through the FBI, which is a good thing, because that way you know that you're talking with trusted colleagues, because someone's actually checked their background and made sure that they're upstanding and decent folks. And so, but that said, you know, the solutions that we're dealing with here, as we help our banking industry solve these problems, or we help the power industry, well, those best practices are going to go all over the world. So the work that we're doing here will have a global impact.
Yeah, so that really goes to both the domestic and international, and why they should be involved. Looking at this, you have a client, what's kind of the 1 to 5 steps or 1 to 10 steps that you go through as trying to solve a problem before maybe they even know they have a problem?
Well, a lot of times, you know, it's a matter of sitting down and thinking through a process that says, well, what are the things that are really critical to your business, and how do you protect them now? And what happens, you know, if power went out for 6 months, for example, how would that affect the processes in your business, and could you continue? And, you know, what would you need to change in how you do business to continue? You know, if, say, the grid went down, do you need a microgrid? Do you need on-site fuel storage more than 7 days? One of the things we saw in Puerto Rico was the idea of priority refueling just kind of broke down because nobody could get to the trucks to deliver the goods. So we had to help companies and a lot of our clients think through that process and say, what were the assumptions based on, and are those still holding? Are they true?
Yeah, and this is the whole thing too, and all this, David, we think about, you know, cyber, and we think about all these very sophisticated things. But you're right, the drivers literally could not get out of their front yard.
Yeah.
Because their cars couldn't go anywhere, because if you're going somewhere you work, and the trucks may be 5-10 miles away, and they had to either walk there, and then once you get there, how are you going to get out? Because trees were all over, you know, the parking lot and all these other kinds of things. So how do you allow people to think through what really is their critical infrastructure? Because you don't think about your parking lot being filled with trees as part of that critical infrastructure, but you may think about cybersecurity. So how do you look at it in toto?
Well, you know, I think part of it is rethinking the assumptions that are used by our public utilities commissions on pricing, for example. Right now, you know, they've done a good job at helping keep our rates low, but there's really no surcharge for resilience. You know, and so we need to think about how do we build risk in to a lot of our cost models, so that we can do things like cost recovery for cyber hardening or for EMP protecting our grid.
Yeah, well, all these things are very interesting. We're not going to solve them right here, but it's just incredible what you're doing. This is David Winks, Managing Director, AccuSite, and David, thank you for being with us. You've
My
done
pleasure.
an absolutely fantastic job. And I love what you're doing with InfraGard. It's really an incredible organization. Thank you, dear viewers, for being with us as we look around the globe as we create the Emerald.